to start with a general preface. This question is asked so many times on the internet as people watch the Animatrix episode, and there's the second Renaissance, and it's just okay. How did machines survive nuclear weapons? To see that, we're just going to watch the opening of part 2.
And man said, "Let there be light." And he was blessed by light, heat, magnetism, gravity, and all the energies of the universe. The prolonged barrage engulfed 01 in the glow of 1,000 suns. But unlike their former masters with their delicate flesh, the machines had little to fear of the bomb's radiation and heat. Thus did 01's troops advance outwards in every direction, and one after another, mankind surrendered its territories.
Okay, and that's where people ask the question is, okay, how they survived that? I mean, they just cluster bombed the whole country run by the machines and nukes. How does that work? And my answer is, I can present to you some ways and concepts by which it works. Some of this is real world science, some of this is real world examples, and obviously there are reaching assumptions out there that this is out in the 22nd century where this war is taking place, or at least when it starts, because it's going on up to the main Matrix films, which is 500 years after they started the Matrix. So approaching the end of the 2700s, early 2800s is when the Matrix films are taking place. But either way, over all these times, machines aren't exactly immune to the physical effects as you see in the war scenes of the Second Renaissance. Weapons have number effects, as you can see here in the scene. You see the bit more immediate physical effects, such as the famous scene in Terminator 2, which is regarded as one of the most realistic nuclear weapon scenes that Hollywood ever made. Basically, where Sarah Connor's nightmare and Los Angeles nuclear bomb. Some of the effects were mechanically given for the machines, shockwaves. Shockwaves and heat that, if they get hit by it directly, thousands of degrees Celsius outside the fireball, it gets hot really fast. Steel will melt, and if it doesn't melt, it gets malleable from the heat, or it bends, and then the shockwave finishes it all off. So it burns from the bright flash, heats everything up, and then the shockwave runs through and tears it all apart. However, and again, the shockwave in some ways is moving faster than the speed of sound in air at sea level. So yeah, you're being hit by something really hard. And while this isn't an immediately noticeable effect, besides the outright destruction, nuclear weapons produce an electromagnetic pulse, because the energy of the nuclear weapon is energizing and exciting the atmosphere so that the air molecules give off radiation, and that's what an electromagnetic pulse is. It's also called in slang radio burst. It's essentially a microwave or radio wave. It's being given off at high energy doses. And it's not just nuclear weapons that does that, and I'll talk more about it in the next electromagnetic pulse, EMP. Machines could be resilient to fallout, because charged particles, as long as they have a metal shell on the outside, similar to the lunar landers and the Apollo program or spacecraft, they can easily use the metal shell to absorb electrons and alpha and beta particles, which is beta alpha particle being a helium nucleus and a beta particle is a neutron. They would have much problems with the particle radiation at all. I see in Shockwave, there are long-band underground reinforced structures that provide degrees of protection. And as you see in the second Renaissance, you're shown that no, you can't really destroy them completely because they have critical buildings underground. And to get an idea of underground, you have the diagram right here. And there's a circle formed right there, the highlighter. As I've shown you right here, you have, as I showed, all these underground buildings, nuclear weapons won't hurt. And because the nuclear weapons didn't work from the underground structures, as they show here, they took out Operation Darkstorm, which is where they blocked the sun with dark clouds. The effect went all over the Earth, and that's going to be the topic for the next episode. But in the meantime, alright, they had to do that as a way of essentially starving them because they can shelter from the effects of a nuclear weapon. And as I said, they have reinforced shelters deep underneath. And this diagram shows that. And as you can see in this diagram, you see the obvious layers of structure under the ground. So you have the small dot, the very deepest part, which is the lower part of the crust, near the mantle. And as you go up, you're clearly seeing that they have some kind of, they've literally dug miles into the ground, miles deep. That's beyond what a nuclear weapon is going to affect. And there's just some examples of reinforced and underground shelters that have existed and have provided degrees of protection to people from just general bombs. In the case of, as you're going to see here in Nagasaki. So this is the tunnel shelter that some people went in during when Nagasaki was hit by the atom bomb. This is a museum exhibit. They kept some of the damaged or shaking and cracks on display, but obviously they're trying to preserve it for history, so some parts aren't exactly the way it would be, but this is a pretty good image here, any color of how it would have looked at after it got shook. You see there's cracks in the ceilings, but it's way less damaging as you're going to see here than if you were above ground. That's the entrance to the shelter, and it's all just leveled and burned. It's pretty tough material. I mean, it was originally designed for conventional bomb dropping, but as you can see, like everything above it is just destroyed by the atom bomb. Just boom, all the rubble right in front of the entrance. You can see bits of concrete and steel bars. It's a mess. The electromagnetic pulse, we understand this electromagnetic pulse is a burst of energy, electromagnetic radiation. It's also referred to as radio burst because that's a description of the radio waves or microwaves emitted intensely as a burst that triggers the effect. And what it does is the radiation from the electromagnetic pulse induces electrical current. It's electrical circuits of metal. For stuff that's already turned on, there's created a power surge that overloads the circuit, so it blows it, fries it. And now, electromagnetic pulses created varying levels of energy from various effects. Just a regular lightning arc creates it. I mean, if you've probably noticed in the video, when people are videotaping lightning strikes, you get this blurry interference. That's a weak electromagnetic pulse interfering with your digital camera. All right, from the lightning bolt. Or even more, you can get even more powerful ones from nuclear weapons. And that's what they learned about when testing nuclear weapons in outer space, or in orbit, rather, during the Starfish Prime, or Fishbowl Prime was the name of the few nuclear weapons tested in outer space during the 1960s. Here by the United States, the Soviets did their own set of those, but they found out that yes, nuclear weapons work in outer space, but they also cover a large area with the electromagnetic pulse from the way the explosion works in space. So, yeah, that's pretty devastating. But overall, the inducting electrical current means that there is a way to protect against it as well. It's called a Faraday cage. Faraday cage is such that, again, if an electrical current is running along the cage, you get a counteracting opposite electrical current inside the cage, which cancels it out. And essentially, people inside this cage, as you see in this picture, are protected. They can touch the inside of the cage and they will not be shocked. And the electricity will travel down the cage into the ground. Pretty cool. There'll be a demonstration of the Faraday cage in the next slide. But the basic idea of a Faraday cage has to be a mesh or a solid shell of metal. Because of the metal obviously being a strong conductor of electricity. It forms an opposing electrical charge and electrical current inside the cage, which cancels out the current running along the outside of the cage. Here's a demonstration of how a Faraday cage works by Dr. Krishna Rajgopal. This is courtesy of the MIT Free Lecture Series. I recommend these. They're a nice, easy way to brush up and review your old physics, or even just learn basic physics. These are basic physics courses, and you can watch them as YouTube videos for free. Free lectures from MIT. Here are examples of Faraday cage, as you can see in the middle. There's the square one. There's the one with a huge Van de Graaff that's being shocking it with really strong lightning arcs. And there's obviously just a little bird cage. The little birds inside are okay. It's not doing anything to them. But here's the part, is that, as I mentioned before, it also absorbs electromagnetic radiation. And its absorption of electromagnetic radiation in the Faraday cage depends on how thick the cage is, and then whether or not you have holes or circuits running in and out of the cage. Okay, so you can essentially get into a Faraday cage. You have an antenna with a wire running in through a hole in the cage. So that's a type of vulnerability right there. Now, your car acts as a cage when you're getting struck by lightning. Alright, but it's not always perfectly shielded against electromagnetic pulse because it has an antenna system for radio reception. And this is also would be a possible reason why machines in the Matrix films are vulnerable to electromagnetic pulse, is because they receive data wirelessly. So their antenna, or whatever their reception for wireless data, means the radiation from the AMP gets inside of them and gives them a power surge to the inside and fries them. But the thicker the metal shell is, this courtesy of the MIT Free Lecture Series.
So today we are going to learn about electrostatic shielding and Faraday cages, and why it's not such a bad thing if you're in a lightning storm, as long as you're inside a car. And I don't want to do that with me, so we're going to do it with Benjamin. Here we have Benjamin Franklin wearing a nice little Hawaiian hula skirt made of tinsel, and he is about to be in a thunderstorm. We are going to make our thunderstorm with our Van de Graaff generator. You can think of the belt in the Van de Graaff generator going around like this as analogous to the air circulation underneath the thunderhead as the thunderhead builds up. And then you can think of this up here as the analog of the cloud. So as soon as I unground this, it's going to start charging up. And you see Mr. Franklin there getting a little bit uncomfortable. You see his hula skirt streaming out behind him as he is in right now in quite a large electric field. As you can get a sense there, he's not so happy at this point. Maybe I'll turn it up even higher.
This is the MIT3 lecture series.
There you see. Well, I've got a lightning bolt going to my grounding rod, and as you can look at what's happening to Benjamin as the lightning bolt hits the grounding rod. There you go. Benjamin is not happy. So now what we're going to do is we are going to have the same thunderstorm, the same electric field, but we are going to put Benjamin in a Faraday cage. So to put him in the cage, I'm going to start by turning this off, and we'll ground him. And here's my Faraday cage right here. I'm going to put Benjamin in the cage. Here we go. Okay. Benjamin's going to be in the same spot that he was before, same tinsel skirt that he had before, but this time he is in a cage, like, for example, if you're in a thunderstorm, but you are safely in a car. So let's see whether it is indeed safe. And here we go. Let's turn on the thunder, or the lightning, rather. Let's turn on the lightning. Now, if you look, you can see that there's lightning hitting the cage. There's that lightning bolt going from the Van de Graaff right to the cage here. And you can see that the cage has a very considerable electric field on it by looking at the tinsel over here on the far side, which is streaming out behind it just like the tinsel on Benjamin was before. But now look inside at Benjamin in there, and I have to be careful not to touch the cage. But now look inside at Benjamin in there, and his tinsel is completely motionless. Benjamin is completely comfortable in there, calm, at rest, while the lightning storm rages around him, literally around him, and that just got me. If I touch that, I get shocked. Okay, that's what I just got shocked, but Benjamin is completely safe. This is the phenomenon of electrostatic shielding, and this kind of a cage is often called a Faraday cage. And we'll now turn the lightning off.
Here are examples of Faraday cages. You can see in the middle. There's the square one. And there's the one with a huge Van de Graaff that's being shocking it with really strong lightning arcs. And there's obviously just a little bird cage. The little birds inside are okay. It's not doing anything to them. But here's the part is that, as I mentioned before, it also absorbs electromagnetic radiation. And its absorption of electromagnetic radiation in the Faraday cage depends on how thick the cage is and whether or not you have holes or circuits running in and out of the cage. Okay, so you can essentially get into a Faraday cage with an antenna with a wire running into a hole in the cage. So that's a type of vulnerability right there. Now, your car acts as a cage when you're being struck by lightning, but it's not always perfectly shielded against electromagnetic pulse because it has an antenna system for radio reception. And this is also would be a possible reason why machines in the Matrix films are vulnerable to electromagnetic pulse, because they receive data wirelessly. So their antenna or whatever their reception wireless data means the radiation from the AMP gets inside of them and gives them a power surge to the inside and fries them. But the thicker the metal shell is, the thicker the walls of this metal shell, the greater the wavelength of the radiation that it will absorb and prevent from coming in. So if you had a really big Faraday cage with a really thick walls of the cage, that's going to absorb almost everything. A really good shield from electromagnetic pulse or just radiation in general. super effective. And as a matter of fact, there is a very good Faraday Cage in the Matrix series, Zion. This picture is made as a fan work, but it nonetheless goes through the design of Zion. As you can see, Zion has this massive shell shape, metal walls. Walls are all metal, it's going up and down, and then metal goes into the ground. And then they have their little temple tower. But as you notice right here, there's the tower. Zion has these walls that are pretty thick, and they're all metal walls. Okay? Just straight up metal. And in essence, this is even confirmed that Zion is a Faraday Cage in the Matrix Evolutions. So here I'm going to just show you this part where they save Zion by letting out the electromagnetic pulse, but in order for them to do that, they have to get inside the gate and use the Faraday Cage properties to channel the EMP. So it's one of my favorite parts from the Matrix series, this last mid save.
Yeah, I believe.
Yes.
Can we make it?
We ain't come this far.
Humans made this city inside Faraday Cage. It's not beyond possible that the machines could make something similar. And we're going to look at more Zion. And they're just getting fried because they're not shielded. But if they were outside the walls of Zion, and this is all enclosed, and this went off inside Zion, it wouldn't do anything to them outside. Or the reverse, they had to get inside Zion to deliver this because Zion would absorb it. And interestingly enough, if humans made this city inside Faraday Cage, it's not beyond possible that the machines could make something similar. And we're going to look at more cases of protective shelters that have been made by people in the modern days, in the 20th and 21st centuries. So they have the salt mines in Krakow, Poland. There's Dixia Chang, and there's Cheyenne Mountain Complex. One of these is a military installation that was just built, and the other one is something that could be used as such, but it's just a repurposed old mine. And they repurposed and essentially built a community in this mine because it's just so much they're digging out. And a lot of the miners are just deep underground. You want some kind of semblance of life in the real world outside the mines. So they built essentially a community with various amenities that you would have to help the miners feel a little bit morale because you're digging salt underground. So first one is China's secret city, Dixia Chang. It's capable of sheltering millions underneath Beijing. It's built during the 1970s because tension got pretty bad between China and the USSR, and China's like, let's build something that could protect a lot of people. Now let's just make this a city that could essentially grow food, store so much food, and keep people comfy while we're waiting out the days and weeks of high radiation for it to all drop off, as well as just stand explosions are being really deep underneath the city. So this is a tremendous effort that took around a decade to complete. But this Dixie at Chang, you're talking about millions being sheltered down there. It's tremendous. And just an amazing part about what China would do when they're scared of nuclear weapons from their series of skirmishes with the USSR. There's the Wachowski salt mine in Krakow, Poland. This is made over multiple centuries, starting from Renaissance times into the present. But this is literally a massive deposit of salt. So they dug out the salt, and over time, I mean, the salt goes really deep. So we're talking about over 300 meters in depth, and the total length of all the tunnels in there is over 245 kilometers. Now, obviously, this is being done over centuries, but even then, this is huge. This is a lot of area that you're digging out. And for the miners, when you're going that deep, it's pitch black dark down there, okay? Really dark. So for a lot of the miners, it's just like, let's just build what our accommodations, and they have just about everything there. They've got a ballroom, they've got a chapel, they've got dormitories, cafeterias, mess, just they just built it as if they built it to give the resemblance to the real world, or the world on the surface. And by doing so, it delivers something for the miners. And in the modern days, it's a pretty durable shelter if they wanted to use it for such. Now, this one was a work undergone by the United States Air Force, and it's both a monitoring station for air and space. So to warn people of an incoming nuclear attack, and it's also a massive shelter for the military personnel. And this is built with a number of features to make it survive a nuclear attack. And that's just the entry tunnel going straight into the rock. Right? But this took multiple years with all the equipment they had. And this right here is just a very thick steel blast doors. There's multiple layers of these steel blast doors that people are going to go behind if they need to shelter. So this door seals shut. It's airtight, seals shut, multiple layers, protecting people from the radiation, as well as all the heat. And in order to keep it going, well, they've also got a way to keep people safe by having this whole base built on a series of really strong springs. So the springs allow it to absorb all the vibration from it getting hit, because a nuclear weapon is obviously going to create a whole lot of shock. So the whole base will shake along with the springs, and a lot of the damage from shaking the base on the inside will be reduced by the springs. The base is also built with the Faraday Cage enclosures so that a lot of important equipment will not be fried. A little over 5 years to build it with a huge amount of military resources. Going back to 01 in the Animatrix, there was about 40 years of relative peace. So even if the machines took about, say, 20 years with advanced tech from the 22nd century, think of how well that would work. All right. And this is the details I was mentioning earlier. But think how machines could build it with technology from the 22nd century. And say 20 years, because some years would be spent just establishing themselves, but 20 years. This is one of those durable reinforced structures there is, and it's only 5. So in conclusion, machines can survive. There's modern day tech to allow for that. And check out more content from the Matrix Online and the other contributors to Matrix University. If you enjoy this presentation, I have the hashtag for NeoMatrixology, VesuveusMxO, or myself, Matrix University. You can look for me on YouTube or Facebook with the hashtag Kaos Nova. I'll have links in the cards and description for this. And if you really enjoyed this, feel free to hit the like button if you want to see more from me. Hit subscribe, and if you want to be notified as soon as works get uploaded, hit the alert button with the bell. And this is my works cited.